My name is Muhammad Nizam. I'm from DKA1A. My matrix number is 07DKA21F2057. This is oral presentation, and my topics is about the inflation. By the way, do you heard that an increase in the minimum wage cause inflation? And did you heard that due to the inflation, the cost of raw materials and production increased sharply? And do you heard that unemployment rate will rise and more people will lose purchasing power after the inflation? So let's spill to the topic. So what is inflation? In economy, inflation means the increase in the general price level of goods and services in our economy from time to time. With the increase in the general price level, each unit currency can only buy goods and services in lesser amount than before. Thus, the inflation also reflects a decline in purchasing power of money, which is a loss real the value in the medium of internal exchange and units of account in our economy. A major measure of price inflation, which is the annual percentage change in the general price index, commonly called the consumer price index over the time. And inflation measure for what? Inflation is often measured by calculating the rate of increase of a price index, which often refers to the consumer price index CPI. The CPI measures the price of a group or basket of goods and services purchased by consumers. The inflation rate is taken from percentage rate of change in the CPI over a period of time. And other price indices used to calculate inflation are as follows. Number one, the cost living index. Number two, the producer price index. Number three, the commodity price index. And the last one, the core consumer price index. So, what makes the factors of inflation? They have four factors. One, cost push inflation. This factor due to higher production costs. The increase in the cost of production is due to the increase in price for factors of production such as wage levels. For example, if the wage rate rise sharply, then the cost of production will increase. So when production costs increase, then producers who always want to maximize profits will charge high price to consumers. The inflation pulls demand. Demand pull inflation is caused by an imbalance between the total demand and the total of supply of goods and services in a country a given time. If there is a high increase in a total demand compared to a total supply, then the inflation will exist. This situation exists when an increase in a demand occurs at a time when country's economy is at a full employment level. When an economy reaches full employment, it is difficult to raise the level of production quickly to meet this soaring demand. This increase in demand can be due to two. And number one is increase the income levels. So what is increased income levels? It is the high increase in aggregate demand was due to an increase in consumer income. This high income will increase the tendency of consumers to spend, and this will increase the amount of demand in an economy. Typically, an increase in consumers' income occurs at the time when the economy is experiencing high growth. Number two, the increased money supply. So, what is the increased money supply means? A large supply of money in the economy can increase the amount of demand in the country. If this money supply is not controlled, then the economy as a whole has a high rate of liquidity and it will increase the amount of demand in the country. If too much money is chasing few goods and services, then inflation will exist. Let's move to the third factor, imported inflation. Imported inflation can be caused by two factors, which is number one, the rising price abroad, number two, the declining exchange rates. We look to the rising price abroad first. Inflation can be absorbed in a country to import, especially for an open economy that imports a lot of goods and services from abroad. If this import price increases, then it will affect domestic prices. The declining exchange rates. This import inflation is also by the exchange rate. For example, if the exchange rates of Malaysia's money with the United States falls, then directly Malaysia has to spend a lot of money to get a certain amount of goods and pay a high price. Of course, the new price will be imposed on domestic consumers. And this is the last factors. Consumer expectations. If consumer expectations make an expectation that price will go up in the future, they will spend now and this will increase the amount of demand in economy. In turn, this will provide an opportunity for producers to take advantage of price increase. I hope with this explanation help you to understand why and how the inflation works. Let's we move to the impacts of inflation in commons. It affects the rise of living costs. High inflation rates will increase the price of common goods and raise the cost of living. After that, it also affects the living standards. During inflation, there is an increase the cost of living, and this will cause the standards of living decline. Last but not least, it also affects the economic growth. Affecting economic growth, it is also domestic investments returns decline. High inflation will affect competitiveness, declining exports, and declining the incomes. Is there happen any inflation today? Yes. Here is an example. 4.1 impacts of worldwide inflation. The war of Russia and Ukraine. It caused restrictions on raw materials to countries in Europe. The Russian government has stopped the export of their goods, and day by day, the higher the demand and the less the supply. It affects the increase in the price of goods sharply and brings worldwide rations on raw material. Ukraine also has announced to ban certain items of raw materials, especially the wheat. Ukraine stops exporting wheat to the rest of the world. For the information, they are the second largest exporter in the world. From these actions, it also causing a food rations worldwide. And then the Kazakhstan, they also is known to stop exporting wheat to other country due to worldwide inflation and crisis of war Russia and Ukraine. And Argentina, they started restricting beef exports to other country before the war to tame down food inflation. Also Indonesia, the world's top cooking oil exporter, they choose going to ban exports of the oil on May 2022. So it sent the global price of edible oil soaring. Also, our country, Malaysia, a sufficient stock of raw chicken due to worldwide inflation. Our country failed to procure raw chicken from abroad, so they chose to stop exports local raw chicken to Singapore to ensure sufficient chicken stocks for Malaysians. So raw chicken are very limited locally or international for now. And 4.2, the most popular digital impact. The inflation has dropped the worldwide currency. For example, Malaysian ringgit versus the US dollar that opens sometimes low and opens sometimes high. It also dropping the crypto market. That was a piece of fact from the worldwide inflation. So we can avoid being hit by inflation around the world. We have to find a solution to reduce inflation for our country, society, and economy. By the way, did you know our country import more than 80% of raw material, especially wheat from foreign country? So, how do we survive due to the worldwide inflation? See it. 5.0 the solution for inflation. First, invest in a business that requires moderate capital. In a situation of high inflation, business that requires low capital are able to maintain profits are very good to invest. Example, the strong brands like Coca-Cola and Apple that requires low capital but able to maintain profits. Second one, find a business that can be priced during high inflation. Price power is one of the most important characteristics in evaluating a business. If you can raise price without losing business to competitors, So they have an excellent business. Companies that have a competitors such as Google, Microsoft, and Facebook perform well during high inflation as they are able to increase selling price in line with rising costs. And then we also can make a gold investment. Among all available asset classes, gold is often seen as a hedge against inflation because gold can always outperform inflation in the long run. Gold is often considered a safe haven asset because it performs well when other assets such as stocks perform poorly during the inflation. From this topic, we can summarize that inflation teaches us to be more frugal in spending. We also need to be more open space for public to generate income to cover the cost of living today. And we know that brings harm to the world economics. Last but not least, it teaches us to build planning and be better prepared in the event of worse crisis in the future. Thank you. That's all from me.